PC Mohanan, who resigned as the acting chairman of the National Statistical Commission, has warned against using statistical data as a political tool. Mohanan, along with one other NSC member, had quit in protest against the centre's decision to withhold an important jobs report. He has now written to CNBC TV 18 on questions raised by economists and statistical data. Latha Venkatesh joins us now with Pronab Sen, former Chief Statistician of India. Latha, over to you.
Thank you very much, Arib. Dr. Sen, just to detail to you the main points raised in the note that Mr. Mohanan has written on the CNBC TV 18 website. He says that, of course, making statistics a political tool is an extremely dangerous game, since statistics are a public good. And he refers specifically to the jobs data, which was one of the questions raised by the economists and countered by the chartered accountants. He points out that, when a Prime Minister asks leading loaded questions like, if you've given 12 crore people loans under Mudra, wouldn't jobs have been created? When there have been the maximum number of roads built in the past 5 years, wouldn't jobs be created? When there are so many rural houses built, wouldn't jobs have been created? Now, when such loaded questions are asked, obviously the NSSO has kind of gotten scared out and does not want to release its report, which clearly from the leaked pages is a report that shows that unemployment was at a 45-year high in the year after demonetization. So basically, he says the silence of the NSSO points out to their subordination to the government, but they can't be blamed because of these leading questions put out by none other than the Prime Minister himself. He also points out that the Niti Aayog Vice Chairman and the Finance Minister questioned the quality of statistics when the government's own gazette says that only the statistical agencies are entitled to comment on any erroneous interpretation of statistics. On the GDP data, again, he points out that the revision of the base year to 2011-12 required elicited a demand that back statistics be calculated, back data be calculated. And there, the back data calculated by, first of all, it was presented by the Niti Aayog, which itself was not in proper form. And secondly, it did not match at all with the back data calculated by the National Statistics Commission members themselves. And hence, economists are doubting it. As well, of course, economists are doubting how in a post-demonetization year, GDP growth can be as high as 8.2%. And finally, he points out that the NSC has no teeth. The Rangarajan Committee clearly said that the National Statistics Commission be appointed and that it be a statutory legal entity. As of now, it's just an advisory committee. The ministry treats it as an appendage because they borrowed their administration and no one takes them seriously. They're sidelined, which is why they had to resign. Those were the main contents of the letter, of the note. Dr. Sen, first up, what are your comments on his statement that we are playing a very dangerous game by making statistics kind of political?
Well, I completely agree with that. But, I think one needs to understand the context a little bit. It's unfortunate but true that until quite recently, statistics was never an element in any government's projection of itself. It has become so now. So earlier, governments used official statistics essentially for decision-making purposes, and there was therefore a requirement from within the government to have accurate statistics. Now, statistics has become a part of the larger political campaigning process and the public relations process of the government of the day. And therefore, these sorts of things, while not inevitable, one can see where it's coming from. So so the statistical system has actually become a victim of the growing importance of statistics in the Indian economy, where it's gone well beyond the government.
Okay. Let me come to some of the remedies that Mr. Mohanan is suggesting. One of which he says is make the National Statistics Commission a statutory body with its own secretariat.
That is absolutely correct. That was the recommendation of the Rangarajan Commission. The real question is what should be the nature of that statutory body? And there is something of a debate on this. There was a proposal to have this body being outside of the government as a registered society. And anybody who's been in the government knows that the government system and the official statistical system is a government system, would simply ignore any entity which is outside of the government.
Okay.
The other is to give it a statutory status within government, which is really the better option.
Okay. Would this mean that they are chosen something like the MPC?
Not really. The MPC continues to be, in a sense, appendage of the RBI. But there are other bodies which do perform this kind of a function, like the NGT,
Okay.
National Green Type Tribunal.
Sure. Okay, so a tribunal-like status to the, independence of that order. The current, doubts over the GDP series, is this impeding people doing doctoral, research or postdoctoral research on Indian GDP data itself, the way it has been recast? So is there an academic urgency to relook at the recast numbers?
Well, you see, of course it'll affect people who are, intensive users of the data, and academics are the most intensive. But, that's maybe of future importance, because by the time all this academic research comes into the public domain, some time would have passed. The more important thing is that if these data are used for policy-making purposes, so if the government actually believes in the stuff itself, then policy-making becomes really and seriously problematic. The second, of course, is that every corporate in India uses this data very, very intensively now for their own internal planning purposes. All of that becomes seriously problematic again. So I think, this is what I meant by the sort of a democratization of the use of official data, that a very large number of people actually use it, not for academic purposes, but for decision-making purposes. Okay. And that's what's really going to be impacted.
Well, now that the back data and this NSSO has been called to question, how do you, other data put out by this NSSO or by the CSO have not been held to question. Most people do not doubt their integrity. It's only these two points, the NSSO labor survey not being released and the back data not quite gelling with other data or that calculated by the NSC. How is this to be righted? Mr. Mohanan wants the CSO to proactively engage. But what would be your solution to right these wrongs, if any?
In any case, there is, I think, a very, very important distinction between these two sets of data, which is the GDP and the employment data. The employment data is a primary survey. It's collected from households. That data, to the best of my understanding, nobody has questioned. That data is extremely difficult to manipulate and tamper with. And therefore, the only option left is to suppress it.
Okay.
So you don't have it. Short. GDP data, on the other hand, is a compilation of data. And the manner in which you compile data can vary. And there is nothing which says that there is only one unique way of putting things together. The UN system of national accounts gives various alternatives to calculate the same end figure. Now, which one you adopt is a statistical decision. That you look at the data and you decide which is the appropriate method. And this can only be argued by statisticians themselves. What Mohanan is pointing out is right, which is that there is a deafening silence from the upper echelons of the statistical system. Neither the CSI nor the head of the National Accounts Division, nobody is talking. Now, when you have that kind of a deafening silence, then of course people start questioning. And you have, the likes of the Vice Chairman of Niti Aayog, the CEO. the CEO of Niti Aayog, who are coming out and talking about. The finance minister is talking about it, none of whom are statisticians. Right?
Yes.
So their words really do not carry credibility in the eyes of the user.